So we don't have a tremendous amount of stuff to cover, but I want to look at two different situations out here and kind of reinforce some of the things that we talked about in class. Okay, on your handout you'll see that there are two sets of data. We've already seen that on a slide. It's okay, I think. So I think there's one that says block 1 upland, or what does that say? Block 1 bench. Okay, bench. Maybe I do need. I just didn't know if I could hold it. Okay, so that's where we are. All right. So we've got two different kinds of cover that we listed on there: canopy cover and basal cover. Have you guys had any experience with what those are other than my little red line going through on the slide today? So canopy cover is if we looked, you know, oftentimes we'll use something like a Dobbin wire quadrat, right? It's a fixed size. You throw it down there, you look down at the top of it. Anybody, Bailey, why don't you come over here and tell me what you think about cheatgrass cover?
Just as a whole.
Yeah, what would you say? Just not cover class, but just a straightforward number.
As far as canopy?
For cheatgrass, yeah.
I'd probably say 65 to maybe 70%.
Okay, so 65–70% canopy cover, right? It's a quick way to do it. It gives you some idea of how much cheatgrass you have looking down on it from the top. I think you would all agree there's a pretty good bit of cheatgrass on this site, right? And if you're driving by, or if you look over behind May or over this way, you might make the assumption that that's all there is, right? Looking down from the top, sometimes that's often the case as well. And if you look at your numbers, you'll see that we were at about 78% cheatgrass. Pretty darn close.
Was this site disturbed, burned? Is this just it?
It's just a trap.
Okay, so there may, so no drastic disturbance recently. There may have in the past been some kind of a grazing issue at some point in time. So one of the things that you'll see though is just looking around, and some of these bare areas that don't have cheatgrass, you can see there's other stuff there, right? So predominantly what you've got in here is blue grama as an understory. Okay, it's a warm season grass, it's a perennial, it holds the soil, good grass. It cures out well, it provides good feed late into the year. One thing you won't see in here with cheatgrass suppression, there's not a lot of blue grama seed heads that are coming up. And oftentimes what we'll see in situations like this is if we can remove the cheatgrass, you just get a really good flush that next year of blue grama seed heads, which may put more seeds into the system and may hopefully over time continue to improve what we're seeing. So just to explain kind of the setup so you guys can follow up online, stay tuned I guess, however we're going to do this. So we've got 5 different plots. Each plot is 10 feet wide by 45 feet long that way. 4 of these were sprayed with herbicides. One was left untreated as a control essentially. So when we come back and look next spring, hopefully we'll have 4 big green blocks and 1 little red block in the middle of it as well. These data that you see that are actual numbers on here were collected, Rachel and I were here on Monday, and we collected, these are the average of the 4 plots that were treated. Now I sprayed them yesterday. I wouldn't expect to see any results today. Okay. Now you'll notice that I've got plot 102 as blanks in the bottom. Now we can run a transect and talk about doing both canopy and basal cover, and that way you guys have some kind of confidence that we're not making these numbers up, and then when you see them online then you'll be able to verify. We interested in doing that? It'll take us about 10 minutes to run down the transect and write down some data. You guys can see one way of doing it's a line point intercept transect. You can use it for a lot of different things, setting up vegetation monitoring in your pastures and things like that. So why don't we run one of those right quick. Now the way that we ran them is to get a little bit longer of a transect as we go from the left hand corner to the far right hand corner of this one. So do you want to help do you want to record? And that way we'll actually have the data set. Grant, will you,
Sure.
Let's see, there should be a pink flag right, so not that one over there, but one right this side of it. And there should be a white stake there. That'd be fine. Okay. So anybody that says science is complicated, I don't believe them. This is pretty easy stuff. So if we're going to look at both canopy cover and basal cover, remember we talked about how basal cover might be a better indicator of recovery potential. And if we're doing a line point intercept, I've just got one of those flags with the pink part torn off. And we'll go every foot.
You guys can come in.
Yeah, you guys can come closer if you want.
We only bite on Mondays.
So we've got it divided into pretty rough classes. You could do it by species if you're really interested in species diversity. Right? You could call out every single species that you hit. Things that I think are really important for assessing your recovery potential, especially basal cover, are bare soil and litter. Right? We know that increased litter, so dead plant material laying on the ground, is a really good place for cheatgrass to get established. But what else do we know that litter does if we're talking about spraying herbicides out here?
Covers up your ground.
It might intercept it, right? It might not get to the soil. So litter on the basal cover is important. High litter may indicate maybe a little bit less recovery potential.
Brian, why did we decide to do canopy and basal? You want to talk a little bit about just doing canopy or canopy and basal both? Because we had a long discussion about that on the way up, on what to do and how to make those decisions.
Okay, so canopy cover versus basal cover. Rachel and I are probably the only couple in Wyoming that argue about stuff like this when we're driving down the roads.
So we're plant nerds.
So, you know, the simpler of the two is canopy cover. Right? You can walk out to an area and look down and you can say, yeah, that looks like about 70% canopy cover of cheatgrass, right? You can make some kind of estimations. But as we were looking at those little cartoony slides, sometimes the canopy cover, especially with a near uniform cover of cheatgrass, is actually hiding what's underneath. So Rachel and I were having a discussion of whether or not only canopy cover gives an adequate representation of what kind of recovery potential you can get from spraying herbicides to control cheatgrass.
And every system is different. I mean, I think we would have had a very different discussion had there been a lot of shrubs, a lot of sagebrush, you know, a different component. So, you know, being aware of your system and deciding this up front before you go into it, I think is an important discussion to have.
I agree. And I think I lean towards canopy cover because when you walk around sticking your head in weed patches all the time, it looks like monocultures, and people will say monocultures, which is just one species. A lot of times it's not. There's other good stuff in there. It's just suppressed, and so you don't see it. Or it's covered up, in this case, by all those little nodding cheatgrass heads.
And bringing up, you know, that point that cheatgrass is such a wimpy little plant, you know, but all this curly stuff underneath is all blue grama. You know, I mean, it's so there's quite a stand of it in this area, not just cheatgrass. So it is helpful to put your nose down there.
Yeah. So no, that's okay. Any questions? Anything else we need to talk about with that? All right. So if we were going to run a line point intercept transect to look at both basal and canopy cover, first thing you'll notice we've got two columns there. We've got canopy and basal, right? So I would go to my 1 foot mark. A point is supposed to be a dimensionless sampling area. This is about the best we can do to be in dimensionless. The first thing that I hit, now if there were plant matter that were up here, a projection that would be hanging over where the tape is, then whatever I hit up here would have been my true canopy hit, right? First thing I hit here is cheatgrass. Okay, and it hits here or it hits here. So my canopy cover for this would be a point of cheatgrass. Okay? If I go down and hit where I hit something solid and my pin stops moving, that's what I would consider basal cover. Sometimes you have to dig around. Now, I'm a little bit, I mean, there's somewhat open to interpretation of the best way to do this. The biggest thing is to be consistent. As long as you're consistent in your data collection, you'll be able to go back and repeat those results. Now, if I hit where one of these cheatgrass stems is actually rooted into the ground, then I would call that a basal hit of cheatgrass. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, I did not hit that. I hit some old dead plant material, so I would say litter. Okay? Simple as that.
What do you consider? Do you consider last year's growth litter, or what would you do with something that was down, but it's this year's litter?
If it's laying like this, I'm calling it litter. If it's still standing, I'll call it cheatgrass.
Okay.
Good question.
It is. Yeah, and that's, you know, if you can set those rules and stay consistent. I mean, some people would break litter into categories, and you know, woody litter, and then and you can
or standing dead.
Standing dead. You can make it as complicated as you want.
Yeah.
Ideally, we would not be doing this time of year, right? Ideally, we would have some green plants that were growing. You may have. I like to monitor cheatgrass areas when cheatgrass is purple, because it's really easy to distinguish between purple and green really fast. You can go fast and you're accurate, especially if you're just doing functional groups, right? So that was a cheatgrass canopy, a basal cover, or a basal litter. So here there is one tiny cheatgrass stem that my pin is hitting. So the canopy would again be cheatgrass, but the base of my pin is right in the middle of a blue grama clump. So our basal cover would be blue grama, right? So that means right now we're at 100% canopy cover over these 2 points for cheatgrass, 50% blue grama basal cover. I don't know that we need to run the entire length of the tape to demonstrate this anymore.
You said that second point was what, 75-25?
Well, no, actually, so between those, so right now we've only taken 2 points, right? So
What numbers did you give right down though?
Well, so but from a sample of 2.
Yeah, from the second one you said it was cheatgrass.
Right, so we had, for both of these hits, our canopy hit was cheatgrass. So that was 100% cheatgrass cover this far along the tape. Right? And I had a litter for basal and a blue grama for basal.
So you marked down a 1 for each?
Right, exactly. So what?
So you got 2 cheatgrass, 1
right. So
exactly, yes sir.
I got you right.
You know, marking.
So now I understand what you're doing.
Exactly. So on your data sheet, you'll just
add them all up.
You'll tally into those categories, and then the way that you would convert that to percent cover is you would just take the total number of hits and you would divide into that the number of hits in that category. Yep, it's pretty. Yeah, sorry, I should have said that. That's the data collection. Is you record each hit as a marked tally in each category. Correct.
Yep.
And how long is the tape?
So this one is about 47 feet, just because of the size of our plots.
Okay. So it just depends on your plot size.
Right.
And those kinds of things.
Typically, if you're doing sort of pasture management, it would either be maybe 100 feet or 100 meters. It depends on how large of an area that you're sampling. One thing, if you're doing it for pasture management type scale, is you don't want to cross ecological sites. For example, like I wouldn't go over here to the other side and run a transect that was 50 feet on the top and then it went down 50 feet. I would want to stay within a plant community type, if that makes sense. So, any questions? You could. So you could, yeah. If it's a really complex system, you could do, you know, upper canopy, canopy 2, canopy 3, and basal. For something like this, I don't know that we need to get into that much detail. It depends on the questions that you're asking. So what Grant is talking about is as I lower the pin, I'm actually going to hit multiple things on the way down in some cases, right? And you can actually say the first thing you hit is canopy 1, the next thing you hit above the ground is canopy 2, and then you can go all the way down to basal. If you're really interested in vertical structure for habitat reasons, that's oftentimes important too. So, and that multi-layered canopy oftentimes is what's capable of intercepting some of your herbicides as well. So the rates, the herbicides that we've got here, we have a 6-ounce rate of Plateau, 3-ounce rate of Matrix, 1.2-ounce rate of Cantor R&P, and then we've got an experimental herbicide that I'm not allowed to talk about yet. But hopefully by next spring we'll be able to talk about it, and we'll see how it does.
Use the backpack.
So I have a CO2 powered sprayer with a 10-foot boom, and I'm calibrated to 20 gallons per acre total solution at 40 pounds per square inch. So I've got a little, it works almost like a Coke machine. So I pressurize a Coke bottle with my spray solution in there, and then that pushes it out to the boom. So it's really efficient when you're changing rates a whole lot. Whereas if you had a big 5-gallon backpack and trying to get everything mixed, and then you can apply very precise rates, and everything's calibrated. And I walk at I walk at about 3.2 miles per hour to get those rates.
And this particular plot is laid out like this, so Brian will spray like this, so if you have pictures on the internet or something, whenever the update comes, the pictures may look like that, just so you guys can have a visual. He may take a picture, looking out that way, and may show the label on the stake that'll look like that, telling you what exactly it is. So
And
that's kind of the layout.
So since this is true pre-emergent, I didn't have any surfactant in because I'm just worried about it getting onto the soil. Surfactant really doesn't do you a whole lot if you're doing pre-emergent. So,
Do you want to explain what surfactant is?
yeah, so surfactant is an additive to your herbicide solution. It can be a number of different things. Usually what it does is it increases the uptake of the herbicide into the plant itself once it's growing. It can help reduce surface tension, and it'll let those little droplets spread out on the leaf and get more of the active ingredient into the plant itself. I don't know if you any kind of post-emergent, I don't know that you'd hardly ever apply it without some kind of adjuvant like that to help move into the plant. Okay, so if you guys were going to make some kind of prediction about recovery potential for this site, what do you think? For this particular set of plots right here, pretty uniform overall. What do you guys think after some of the things that we talked about today?
At least got some understory, so that's going to aid in something.
Okay.